Dear 10th standard students and parents, I am Kiran and I am an educator. CBSE board exam dates are just announced. I have made a few tutorial videos covering each and every concept in the NCERT textbook through question and answer format. The question and answer format will help you to fetch all the points that should be included in your answer. Basically, it will help you to cover the whole textbook in a short span of time. A word of caution though, what I am doing is giving you just an extra support. However, your primary source of learning should be from your teacher at school and the NCERT textbook.
Okay, dear students, now we'll start with chapter 2, the making of nationalism in Europe. So we have got page number 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. So these are the topics or these are the areas which we are going to discuss under this chapter. This is something which is given in the NCERT textbook. So we'll start with chapter 2, the making of nationalism in Europe. Okay, dear students, now we'll start with chapter 2, making the nationalism in Europe. I'll cover this chapter through 10 questions. Okay. The first question, what were the major reasons for lack of nationalism in Europe during the mid-18th century? We have got 3 points. First one, most of the present-day nations such as Germany, Italy and Switzerland remained divided into kingdom, duchies and cantons, which were headed by autocratic monarchs. All right. So we have got 3 terms, kingdom, duchies and cantons. What are they? Kingdom is a territory ruled by a monarch. So we know that there's a centralized system. It's an autocratic system, a kingdom ruled by a monarch. And duchies will come under kingdom, which are kind of vassals. Vassals means subordinates. So under kingdom, we have got duchies, and duchies are ruled by duke or duchess. That means this duke or duchess is inferior or one step lower than the king, and they'll be reporting to the king. Okay. And a canton is an administrative and political subdivision in certain countries, most notably Switzerland. So this division of cantons is in Switzerland. Now, as I've already told you, a kingdom is ruled by a king or queen, and dukes or duchess typically serve as vassals who manage smaller districts on the monarch's behalf. That means on behalf of the king or the ruler, and these dukes and duchess will rule certain smaller district or a territory which is quite smaller, and it is under a kingdom. Okay, fine. So what exactly is the problem with this kind of an arrangement vis-a-vis nationalism? All right. The problem is an individual, a citizen who is coming under a duchies or a canton or even a part of the kingdom will have loyalty only to that part of the territory where they are living and to their ruler. All right. So they don't get this idea of a whole nation. They don't have this belonging for a nation. They always think in terms of their duchies or their kingdom, but they don't consider themselves as a part of the nation. So what were the major reasons for lack of nationalism in Europe? The first point is actually there is as such no concept of nation. Instead, we have got kingdom, duchies and cantons, and people they served in this part never had the feeling of being a part of the nation. Point number 2, diversities of people who lived in Europe with no collective identity or common culture. This is an extension of the first point. So because of this diversities, they live in different kingdoms or duchies, and they are diverse. Ethnically, there could be diversities, and as a result, no collective identity or common culture. Third point, people did not speak a common language. So these were the 3 barriers that affected the emergence of nationalism in Europe. Okay. Now we'll move on to the second question. Explain how aristocracy remained the dominant class in Europe during mid-18th century. In the previous chapter, we have discussed about the three estates like clergy, nobility, and the common man. Clergy formed the first estate, nobility the second, and the common man became the third estate. And this nobility or aristocracy remained the dominant class in Europe during mid-18th century. The members of the aristocracy, even though numerically a small group, so they were numerically a small group, were united by a common way of life. That's a key point. And what are these common ways of life? They owned estates in the countryside and also town houses. So they were basically landlords. Okay, they spoke a common language, the French. Unlike the common man, which we have already discussed, they spoke different languages, right? They never had a common language. So here, this aristocracy, they spoke a common language, that was the French. Their families were often connected by marriage. Okay, so there will be marriage system that will reinforce their relationship, and that consolidated their power. And as aristocracy remained the dominant class in Europe during mid-18th century. So there are 3 points. One, they owned estates in the countryside and also in town houses. They spoke a common language, that is the French. Their families were often connected by their marriage. So these are the 3 points that you should be answering if this question is being asked. Okay. Now we'll move on to the third question. Explain the social composition of Europe in the 19th century. Social composition. This is again an extension of question number 2. A numerically small group of aristocrats who owned small estates. They were financially rich and socially powerful. That was the first group in the social composition. Numerically, even though numerically small, yet powerful aristocracy, aristocrats who owned small estates, financially rich and socially powerful. Second, the majority of the population were peasants, the common man, such as the tenants, small owners, and serfs, depending on the geographical region where they live. So depending upon which part of the Europe they were living, they will have different status, even though all of them have got the common effect. That is, they will be peasants. Okay, they can be called tenants or small owners and serfs. And if you see this hierarchical triangle, these peasants or serfs will be at the bottom of the triangle. All right. And as you see here, the vassals to the lords, nobility, and the king. See, this on the top, that is kingdom with king or queen. Then we get the so-called duchies with duchess and dukes and knights, vassals to lords. These are all the hierarchical system, different terminologies to describe their position. But then the common factor is peasants or the serfs will be always at the bottom of this hierarchical system, and they are at the receiving end. They are the suffering people. So social composition, we have got 2 points: a numerically small group of aristocrats who owned small estates. They are financially rich and socially powerful. The majority of the population were peasants, such as tenants or small owners, and serfs, depending on the geographical region they live. So we have got 2 points to write if this question is being asked. Okay, dear students, now we'll move on to the fourth question. Industrialization led to the emergence of new classes in Europe. Explain. Industrialization. All right. Industrialization began in England in the second half of 18th century, later followed by France and Germany. So what is 80? What do you mean by the term 18th century? 18th century is a period from 1700 to 1799. That's how you should conceive when the number is given as century terms. For example, 19th century means it is 1800 to 1899. That would be the 19th century. All right, fine. Now coming to the point, this 18, so we say it is in the second half of 18th century. What does that mean? 1700 to 1749 is considered as the first half of 18th century, and 1750 to 1799 would be considered as the second half of 18th century. So industrialization began in England in the second half of 18th century, that is somewhere between 1750 and 1799. This led to the emergence of new social groups such as working class population and middle classes. So, two new social groups were emerged during this industrialization. One is working class population and the second one is middle classes. Who were part of this middle classes? Point number 3. Middle classes comprised of industrialists, businessmen and professionals. All right, now let's see what exactly or how exactly these three groups have emerged as a part of industrialization. So the idea is very simple. Whenever you start setting up industries, you'll have big industries and small industries, and those who run industries are called industrialists. All right, those who run business, those who run industry are industrialists. For example, factory owners. Okay, now those who trade with this industrialist, those who come buy goods from the industrialist, take it from the factory and go sell it somewhere else and take money, take profit from this business, becomes the second group, businessmen. All right. So whenever there is an industrial growth, there will be industrialists who will set up the industry, and there will be traders or businessmen who will do the work or business. And coupled with this, there will be professionals in different walks of life, because professionals, for example, you need accountants, all right, who will have to run the business. You need business managers. They're all professionals who will become a part of this business, and thus industrialization will generate, or rather it created new classes like middle classes. Itself is divided into industrialists, businessmen and professionals. So this is how the middle classes got emerged, and finally the educated middle classes spread the idea of national unity in Europe. So industrialization led to the emergence of new classes, and the new classes spread the idea of national unity in Europe. Okay, so we'll have to cover this particular question through 4 points, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay. Now we'll move on to the fifth question. Explain the concept of liberal nationalism. Liberal nationalism implies freedom of individual and equality of all before the laws. All right. So liberal nationalism implies freedom of individual and equality of all before the laws. Politically, the term also describes a government by consent of the people. These are the key points that should be there in your answer. Government by consent of the people, and having a constitution. Next, very important point, there should be constitution to guide and have elected representatives in the parliament. All right. So This concept of liberal nationalism, first of all, it implies freedom of individual and equality of all before the laws. Second point, there should be a government by consent of the people, meaning that the representatives elected by the people should be running the government. Okay, so the government by consent. You know what consent is? Consent means agreement. All right, consent of the people and having a constitution. The country should be governed by a constitution to guide, all right, and have elected representatives in the parliament. Actually, this is what we said, government by consent of the people, because people will select their or elect their representatives in the parliament, and some of these representatives will form the government. All right, fine. Now, it rejected clerical privileges and stood for the end of autocracy. As we have discussed in the first chapter, in earlier Europe, before industrialization in Europe, there were three estates, and the first estate was the clergy. Clergy means priests and people who are associated with the church, all right, the religion. So this clerical privileges, all right, this privileges which is accrued by way of being the first part of the estate and the privileges which you get out of birth, etc. So these privileges were rejected in the idea of liberal nationalism. You don't have this kind of privileges, and it stood for the end of autocracy. No monarchy, no duchies, no cantons, nothing. All right, it stood for the end of autocracy. Fourth point, in economic sphere, liberalism stood for the freedom of markets and abolition of multiple custom barriers and doing away multiple duties at each custom barriers. This is something which we have discussed or mentioned in Napoleonic Code in the previous chapter. Please, if you are not very sure about it, please
refer the previous video.
all right. So in the economic sphere, liberalism stood for the freedom of markets. All right. So freedom of markets, meaning that business will not be or should not be controlled by the government. Freedom of markets and the abolition of multiple custom barriers within one territory. If you have so many so-called duties, duties means money to be paid as tax. All right, so when you have these kind of custom duties, that means a lot of tax if you are paying on business, that is really going to affect the business. Business will not be prospering. All right, and abolition of such multiple custom barriers and doing away multiple duties, just now I mentioned, at each custom barriers. So when you have a liberal nationalism on the political front, we have explained what it is. In the economic front, there should be freedom of markets and you should not be taxing too much. All right, you should not be levying too much of duties. All right, so these are the 4 points under this question. Explain the concept of liberal nationalism. All right, okay. Now moving on to question number 6. What are the changes brought by liberal nationalism in the economic front in 1830s? Point number 1. In 1834, a customs union or Zollverein was formed at the initiative of Prussia. Mind you, it's not Russia, it's Prussia, and joined by most of the German states. And what is this Prussia? Prussia was a kingdom in Europe, the most powerful, one of the most powerful kingdoms in Europe in 1800s. And actually, today's nation of Germany was actually, many of the places in today's Germany were under the kingdom of Prussia. Now you don't have this kind of a country or kingdom called Prussia because Prussia was divided, and it is now part of three different countries. One part of Russia is actually now part of Germany. All right. So Germany at that point of time, Germany, some areas like Rhineland, etc., were under Prussia. So Prussia was ruling. Actually, Prussia was controlling the territories of Germany, and in 1834, a customs union or Zollverein was formed at the initiative of Prussia and joined by most of the German states who were under Prussia. So they all joined in this customs union. So what was the benefit of this customs union? The union abolished tariff barriers. Tariff barriers. What does that mean? Tariff is also called tax barriers. That means you have multiple tax for the same commodity moving from one point to another point. Say the commodity remains the same, let's say it's C, and it will have a 10% tariff or tax at point 1. When this good is carried to another town or a place where you have got another customs barrier, where they will charge for the same commodity another 10 more percent, and when this moves to another point, let's say point 3 or a place 3, where the same commodity attract another 10% duty. So look at this, same commodity taxed 3 times, meaning that it becomes so expensive that finally the seller will not be able to sell it to a common man. So this started really affecting the business. It's a bad idea. So union abolished such tariff barriers and reduced the number of currencies. That was another major challenge at that point of time. Within small territories, there were so many currencies. Believe it or not, at that point of time, there were more than 30 currencies in circulation in this part of Europe. 30 currencies were circulating in this part of Europe, and these 30 currencies were brought down just to 2. All right. So the union abolished tariff barriers and reduced the number of currencies from over 30 to just 2. Okay. Now, the creation of a network of railways. Obviously, you know how important railways are to carry lots of goods from one part of the country to another part in quite a fast time. All right. So, creation of network of railways further stimulate economic prosperity in Europe in 1830s. All right. So what are the changes brought by liberal nationalism in the economic front in 1830s? We have got 3 points. In 1834, customs union or Zollverein. Don't ever miss out this point. This is very, very important. Customs union or Zollverein. You should include this particular term, Zollverein, in German language, which roughly get translated to customs union, was formed at the initiative of Prussia and joined by most of the German states. Second point, the union abolished tariff barriers and reduced the number of currencies from over 30 to just 2. The creation of a network of railways further stimulate mobility, harnessing economic interest to the national unification. All right. Coming to the seventh question of chapter 2. What led to the Treaty of Vienna in 1815? What were the important clauses in that treaty? This could be a very, very important question. Okay, friends. And there are, let's say, the 7 points which you need to remember while answering this question. Okay, let's start. 1. Defeat of Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo in 1815 led to the Treaty of Vienna. It's a must, very, very important point. The what led to the treaty? That was defeat of Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo, year 1815. In 1815, representatives of the European powers who collectively defeated Napoleon, such as Britain, Russia, and Austria, collectively met at Vienna.
Vienna is the capital of today's Austria.
Okay, to draw up a settlement in Europe. Okay, They dropped Treaty of Vienna with the objective of undoing changes that had come about in Europe during the Napoleonic Wars. All right, we had French Revolution followed by Napoleon coming to the power. From a French general, he declared himself as the Emperor of France. He brought in what are called Napoleonic Code or reforms. Okay, so they dropped this Treaty of Vienna with the objective of undoing, meaning doing away or cancelling, undoing changes that had come about in Europe during Napoleonic Wars. All right, so undoing of changes brought in by Napoleon. France lost the territories it had annexed under Napoleon. The Bourbon dynasty, which ruled France from 1589 to 1792, and after 1792, you know what happened. The so called French Revolution has brought in democracy in France. So, up until then, Bourbon dynasty was ruling France and they had been deposed, means thrown out during the French Revolution, was restored after Napoleon lost in 1815. This dynasty was recalled, they were restored to power in 1814. Okay, a series of states such as the Netherlands, Genova, etc., were set up on the boundaries of France to prevent French expansion in the future. So they created certain buffer states which will act as some kind of a check so that French army will not get into these countries' territories. Only after beating Netherlands and Genova, if at all, the French army dared to enter into these countries. When I say these countries, that is Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. So these countries or states will act as buffer zones. Netherlands and Genova, etc., were set up on the boundaries of France to prevent French expansion in the future. This led to the restoration of monarchies. So the French Revolution, very idea of French Revolution was to stop autocracy or monarchy and bring in democracy. But after Napoleon lost the war and in the Treaty of Vienna, they have decided to restore monarchies and created a new conservative order in Europe. What do you mean by conservative order? Conservatives are citizens who think or believe in old conventional society or those practices which go by conventional or practices which has been going on for many years or centuries. No new ideas accepted. That is conservatism. All right. It is opposite of radicalism. All right. So in conservatism, what you do is you will try to bring in old practices. You tend to think that whatever that is happening new should be spoiling the society, spoiling the country, and that's all very bad thing. So what a conservative think is how they can bring back the old traditions, customs, and practices. So that's the meaning of the word conservative. Okay, now coming back to our answer. This led to the restoration of the monarchy. See, this conservatives are happy because they want to be under a monarch or a king because they have been used to that king queen system, loyal to the king and loyal to the kingdom, and created a new conservative order in Europe. So, what led to the Treaty of Vienna 1815? What were the important clauses in that treaty? We have got 7 points. Okay, what are they? The defeat of Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo in 1815 led to the Treaty of Vienna. You can never miss this point. In 1815, representatives of the European powers who collectively defeated Napoleon. Who were they? Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. You can see them. Okay, in this map, Russia. Here is the Britain. All right, we have the Russian Tsar Empire. All right, and we have got Austria Empire. So today's Austria, the capital of today's Austria is Vienna. All right. So these were the countries who were behind this treaty, and they have decided to restrict the dominance of France. All right. Accordingly, they drew up Treaty of Vienna with the objective of undoing changes that had come about in Europe during the Napoleonic Wars. France lost the territories it had annexed under Napoleon. Napoleon was a conqueror who annexed so many countries as a part of France that had to be given up, and they were just released. The Bourbon dynasty. When you hear the word Bourbon, we always think of this biscuit. Actually, it's a name of a dynasty which ruled France. Okay, so you can very well remember the name Bourbon with this biscuit and connect it to the French rulers. Okay, the Bourbon dynasty which ruled France had been deposed during the French Revolution, was now restored to power in 1814 after Napoleon was defeated. A series of states such as the Netherlands, Genoa. See this, you have got Netherlands which share a boundary or border with France. Then we have got Genoa, all right, and Genoa is a part of Italy now, present day Italy, Genoa. See, this is France and this portion. Right now, it's a part of Italy. Genoa forms this part, this region. So there were buffer zones created like this, and as a result, France will have to cross this part to enter into these countries which we have just mentioned. So the Netherlands and Genoa became the buffer states. Okay, were set up on the boundaries of France to prevent. I said buffer state. I use the word buffer. Buffer means something which can neutralize. All right, something act as some kind of a cushion. Okay, so it's a buffer state. I use the word buffer here. A series of states such as Netherlands, Genoa, etc., were set up on the boundaries of France to prevent French expansion in the future. This led to the restoration of the monarchies and created a new conservative order in Europe. So these were the important outcomes of the Treaty of Vienna. Okay. Now coming to the next question, that is the eighth question. What were the key features of neoconservatism that came after the defeat of Napoleon in 1815? So we talked about conservatism in the previous question. And what do you mean by neoconservatism? The word neo means new, and conservatism, we know what it is. All right, a new conservatism. What does that mean? It means that before French Revolution, that was in 1780s, late 1780s, before French Revolution, Europe was under conservative system where we have got centralized power, that is monarchy, all right, kingdom monarch system. Then we have got duchess, dukes, etc. So there was a conservative system, centralized power, no democracy at all, etc. And that was later changed through French Revolution. And after French Revolution, Napoleon came to power. Finally, Napoleon was defeated in 1815, and again conservatives came back to the power through Treaty of Vienna. But this time, the whole political system got changed in Europe. All right, the political system has got changed in Europe. People have gone through a transformation. They tasted new ideas like democracy. All right, in the economic sphere, they have realized how important not to have multiple tariffs, custom duties, etc. So there is all over a new climate which was prevailing, political climate in Europe. Okay, now in this background, just see what were the key features of neoconservatism. That is, conservatives who came to power after 1815 have changed their mindset to some extent. They have become ready to accept new ideas which were already prevailing in the European society, especially after French Revolution. Okay, now what are the key features of this neoconservatism after 1850? Hope you have understood the background or you have understood the question well, right? Now, again, we have got 6 points which you should answer. Conservatives believe that established traditional institutions like the monarchy, the church, social hierarchies, for example, nobility, peasants should be at the bottom of the triangle, which we have studied in the previous question, etc. That is, social hierarchies, property, and family should be preserved. So, the system of having monarchy, giving importance to clergy. That's why the term church is mentioned here, to maintain social hierarchy, right to property, and the family system, traditions, etc., should be preserved. Conservatives believed in modernization brought by the Napoleonic regime. All right. What is a regime? Regime means that governance, ruling carried out by someone. So Napoleon was a conqueror and he ruled France for quite a period of time, and that period of time is referred to as a regime. All right. So Napoleonic regime should be used for strengthening monarchy. That's how they thought. Okay, we are going to bring back monarchy, yet we have this kind of ideas put forwarded by Napoleonic Code, and we should use these ideas to further strengthen monarchy. Okay, so that was the idea of neoconservatives. Third point, they believe that a modern army, an efficient bureaucracy, a dynamic economy, the abolition of feudalism, and serfdom. Again, we have discussed the concept of serfdom, peasantry, etc. in the previous question. Could strengthen autocratic monarchies in Europe. So they believe that a modern army, because being an army general himself, Napoleon emphasized on the modernization of French army. So they believe that a modern army, an efficient bureaucracy. Bureaucracy means the officials who are working for the government. Okay, bureaucracy means the government officials. All right, government officials are called bureaucrats. So those who work for the government, like for example, a revenue collector, a revenue inspector, a judge, a police official, who are all coming under bureaucracy. So an efficient bureaucracy, a dynamic economy. Dynamic economy means an economy which is doing really well. That means business is prospering, government is getting a lot of tax, a lot of import and export is going on. So this is a dynamic economy which gives you an idea about the richness of a country, wealth of a country. A dynamic economy, the abolition of feudalism and serfdom. Feudalism means a feudal lord will get a lot of lands and he will make people work there as bonded laborers, and that's something which you study under serfdom. Already we have discussed that in the previous question. Then could strengthen autocratic monarchies in Europe. So they have decided to abolish feudalism and serfdom, and they have decided to use this modern army and efficient government officials, that is bureaucracy and dynamic economy, so that monarchies can be further strengthened. So instead of a weak monarch, you will have a strong monarch. Now, conservative regimes set up in 1815 were autocratic. All right, there is not even a single bit of democracy there. It's all power is centralized. One or a few people will take decisions, and others have to oblige. All right, others have to oblige. They did not tolerate criticism. Look at that. Typical characteristic feature of an autocrat. They did not tolerate criticism and dissent and sought to curb. Curb means reduce or cut off. Okay, to curb activities that questioned the legitimacy of autocratic government. So, this fifth point, they did not tolerate criticism and dissent. Dissent means to disagree with. See, if someone says something and if you disagree with him, that is your dissent. So, criticism and dissent could not be tolerated by neoconservatives, and they sought to curb means reduce, decrease activities. What activities? Those activities that questioned the legitimacy. Legitimacy means under what authority or under what law you are ruling this country. Who gave you the authority to rule us? That kind of questions. That's called asking for legitimacy of autocratic government. Nobody should question their legitimacy or should not question under what authority you are ruling us, under what authority you are issuing orders. These type of questions which were not liked by conservatives. Okay. And the sixth point is freedom of press. Press means, newspapers was curbed again. Curbed means curtailed. Another word is curbed or curtailed, all right, or decreased or eliminate. And censorship, what to write and what should not be written, was decided by the autocratic government. So freedom of press was curbed and censorship was imposed on books, plays and songs. So through these sources, government should not be questioned or criticized. So these were the hallmark features of neoconservatism that prevailed after 1815 in Europe. All right. Moving on to the ninth question. What led to the formation of revolutionary ideas after 1815 in Europe? So we have discussed neoconservatism in the previous, that is prior question, 8th question. Now we have got revolutionary ideas. Following the Treaty of Vienna 1815, conservatism came back to Europe, which included restoration monarchies and denied all the liberal ideas, including freedom of press. This is something which we have just discussed. All right. Now, this fear of repression drove many liberal nationalists underground. So these liberal nationalists had to go to underground because of the repressive measures taken by the monarchy. And they founded secret societies and trained revolutionaries to spread their ideas. So the fear of repression by the conservatives drove many liberal nationalists, people who think liberally, who argue for freedom, expression, etc. And they had this idea of nationalism instead of being under the centralized power of monarchy. They went underground. All right. And they founded secret societies and trained revolutionaries to spread their ideas. Okay. These revolutionaries believed in nation states as a necessary part of this struggle for freedom. In the introductory session, we did talk about nation states, okay, as a necessary part of this struggle for freedom. Underground societies such as Young Italy in Marseilles and Young Europe
In Bern. Bern is a place in Switzerland.
Marseilles is a place in France, were set up by Italian revolutionary.
Giuseppe Mazzini.
They are the examples for such revolutionary secret societies like Young Italy, Young Europe, examples for revolutionary secret society. And this name
Giuseppe Mazzini.
should be remembered by students because this can be a very important question based on
Giuseppe Mazzini.
name. A question can be asked. Okay, so we have got 4 points. Point number one, following the Treaty of Vienna, conservatism came back to Europe, which included restoration of monarchies and denied all the liberal ideas, including freedom of press. This fear of repression drove many liberal minded nationalistic people underground, and they founded secret societies and trained revolutionaries to spread their ideas. Revolutionaries believed in nation states as a necessary part of this struggle for freedom. Underground societies such as Young Italy in Marseilles and Young Europe in
Bern.
were set up by Italian revolutionary
Giuseppe Mazzini.
are examples for such revolutionary secret societies. And this can be a very important question. It can be a probable question for the exam. So bear in mind these 4 points. Okay, fine. Coming on to the last question of this chapter, that is, what are the contributions of Giuseppe Mazzini as a revolutionary in the post 1815 Europe? Okay, what are the contribution of Giuseppe Mazzini as a revolutionary in the post 1815 Europe? Already we have answered this question in the previous ninth question. As a part of the ninth question, the last point we have mentioned this. So the answer is point number 1. Giuseppe Mazzini set up two secret societies, Young Italy in Marseilles and Young Europe in
Bern.
whose members were from different parts of Europe and believed in nation states and not patchworks of small states or kingdoms. And we have already discussed in detail about the concept of nation states in the first chapter, in the Utopian Vision chapter, question number 3. We have discussed about the difference between nation states and modern states. If you haven't studied that particular topic, please go and check my
Video.
so the rise and nationalism in Europe, in that topic, we have mentioned about nation states. Okay, what is it? What exactly is a nation state? The core characteristic of a nation state is a shared national identity based on common language, culture, history, or ethnicity. All right. So a nation state is a sovereign state. That means it is absolutely powerful. That is, the power is derived from the people of the country. It's a sovereign state where the people are basically, they come from the same ethnicity, they speak a common language, they have the same culture, etc. And we have cited Japan, Iceland, and China as examples. Okay. Now coming back to the point. Giuseppe Mazzini set up two secret societies, Young Italy and in Marseilles and Young Europe in
Bern.
whose members were from different parts of Europe and believed in nation states. That means they should form states where the citizens, that should be sovereign, citizens should be having the same ethnicity, same culture, they should speak same language, etc. And it should not be patchworks of small states. Okay, different small states come together and they should make some kind of a union. That should not be the case, or should not be kingdoms. Okay, and he fought relentlessly. Relentlessly means incessantly, without any break, without getting tired. He fought relentlessly, continuously, persistently against monarchy. So you have got 2 points to answer this question. Contribution of Giuseppe Mazzini, and one is he's set up two secret societies. Yeah, don't forget these names: Young Italy and Young Europe. Okay, and he believed in making nation states. Then he fought relentlessly against monarchy. Okay, so with that we have completed this chapter.
If you find this class useful, please let me know by pressing the like or hike button and by writing your comments. If you want more such videos, please subscribe to my channel, follow my page and share my videos. And I wish you all the best for your exams.